We are turning our attention now to the race for governor. That's happening next year. It'll be here before you know it. Kathy Hochul is up for re-election and is facing a primary challenge from her own lieutenant governor. That's my next guest, Antonio Delgado, who's been calling out the governor over two major pipeline proposals here in New York. This comes after the governor reportedly struck a deal with the Trump administration a few months back in order to save an offshore wind project off the coast of Long Island. We'll explain. The two projects that are under discussion are the Constitution Pipeline and the Northeast Supply Enhancement Pipeline. Hochul has faced mounting pressure from environmental activists and some lawmakers to oppose those new gas pipelines. Joining me now to talk about where things stand in his campaign and much more is Lieutenant Governor and gubernatorial candidate Antonio Delgado. Welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
Always good to see you. Thanks for having me back.
To the idea that to the extent that politics is about the art of the possible, the good, not the perfect, and the governor struck this deal with the Trump administration, some offshore wind project gets to go forward in Long Island, but the gas pipeline connecting, I guess, Pennsylvania and ultimately Texas with the western part of the state, not a deal that you like?
Absolutely not. It's important to understand that these are pipelines that were previously denied permits due to water quality standards that we, as a state, have an obligation to enforce, and as a state have the authority to do so under the Clean Water Act. Nothing has changed with these pipelines. The science hasn't changed, their projected impact on water quality hasn't changed, and the impact to New Yorkers directly hasn't changed. So what we're talking about is a governor who's decided to make a deal with an individual in the White House that will put New Yorkers directly in harm's way. And that is unacceptable, full stop.
And would you, assuming the deal couldn't have been done any other way, the loss of the offshore wind project would have been just a casualty of that reality?
That can't be what we justify, putting New Yorkers in harm's way. The Nessie pipeline you referred to was denied a permit twice now, 19 and 20, it's been denied. So if our state laws have already made it clear that this is going to not meet the quality of water that we want New Yorkers to be exposed to, then in essence, when you make this deal, what you're saying is, we're okay with putting New Yorkers in harm's way, literally putting their well-being in harm's way. And not only are you doing that from a health and wellness standpoint, but the cost of energy, the amount of money that New Yorkers will have to put in to account for this extension of these pipelines, by estimates of 3 to 5% increase in utility bills. So not only is it going to hurt them physically, potentially, but it's also going to hurt New Yorkers economically. So yeah, it is deeply problematic, and it feels a lot more like political theater than anything of substance for the people. Keep in mind, New York is a leader in climate. The CLCPA is a nation-leading climate law. The notion that we would have a governor that would make this kind of deal, that would put New Yorkers in harm's way and is totally at odds with our climate goals and would increase energy bills, what do we have to show for it?
I saw that you signed a petition urging the governor to undo the deal in effect. And I think I know the answer to this, but I do have to ask it. You have her phone number. Have you called her up just to talk about it?
I haven't talked to her about this particular issue. We have a lot of disagreements on a lot of different issues at this point. And who I talk to now more than ever is the people, to elevate their voices and where they view this issue going. And where this issue, and what I've heard from folks all across this state, be it downstate or be it in the southern tier or be it in the Hudson Valley, no matter where you go across this state, folks do not want frack gas being expanded across New York. There was a fight decades ago to ban fracking. And now here we are decades later with a governor of New York who appears willing to sell that fight out. And that is a problem. And I stand with all New Yorkers who understand that we can be better.
Okay. How's the campaign going?
Outstanding. I was just out in Syracuse this week where I received the endorsement of Citizen Action, a grassroots, people-powered organization that is dedicated to making sure that we have a government that works for the people and not for profits, that we have a government that's committed to really tackling economic inequality and making sure that we put public goods ahead of private greed. To me, to have that kind of support is emblematic of the fact that our message is getting out there. We're connecting with people. I did a meet and greet that same day, heard from folks who are struggling when it comes to housing, food insecurity, health care. They want and they deserve more, Errol.
Much of what we're seeing in the race for mayor and in selected other races that are being looked at really all around the country is people who are at wit's end with the status quo, that they just want something different.
Me too.
And they're looking elsewhere. Right. You sound like you want to be their candidate, those people.
I believe that for a very, very long time, this status quo has been broken. Right here in New York, 1 in 5 kids are living in poverty, half those kids in deep poverty. 2 out of 5 households all across New York can't afford basic necessities, and yet we have the largest wealth inequality gap in the country of any state. A $254 billion budget, the 3rd largest economy in the country, the 9th in the world if we were an independent nation. And the question remains, where is the money going? To the top 1% and the big corporations. That's where it's going. People are going hungry, they're hurting, and they don't want elected officials who call themselves for the people, who seem more interested in taking money from the powerful to keep themselves in power at the expense of the very people who gave them power in the first place. So yes, I very much intend to be the people's champion in this moment.
What's the most transformative measure that you think would help close the inequality gap within New York? And by that I mean economic inequality.
I think there's 3 main issues that we need to center ourselves around: housing, healthcare, and wages. From a housing standpoint, we got to get beyond this idea of just giving tax credits to developers and hoping that it somehow will work itself out. We need to stabilize rents all across this state, make it easier for localities to do that kind of work. We need a public developer that is committed to actually doing the work of building off-market, permanently affordable housing. We need a healthcare system that drives the profit motive out of our system once and for all. And we need livable wages, not just a minimum wage. If we can secure these 3 things, I think this state can move forward in a fashion where we lift up all New Yorkers across this state of ours.
That second one sounds like a real big one. How do you get a profit out of the healthcare system? I mean, it's just not set
well,
up.
you take on the insurance companies. You bring more accountability into the system. You actually tax billionaires and big corporations. And by the way, the cost savings you get by eliminating more and more the insurance companies' reach because of its bureaucracy, the middlemen, all the ways in which it profiteers off the individuals. Folks are going bankrupt, Errol. Bankrupt over their health care. Whether it's medical debt now, whether it's personal debt, whether it's credit card debt, people are hurting all around this state and all around this country. And I think there's a real hunger right now for leaders who are prepared to actually rectify this grotesque level of imbalance born of the normalization of greed.
To the extent that you're campaigning all over the state, I know you're paying attention to some of the politics here in New York City. I'm wondering if you've endorsed anybody in the race for mayor.
Oh yes, I endorsed Mondami within 24 to 48 hours of him winning the primary. And do you know why? Because he's the Democratic nominee. It's simple. And I think it's quite notable that leaders all across this state, leaders of our Democratic Party, continue to keep the Democratic nominee at arm's length. The Democratic nominee, who, by the way, won in the first round by a significant margin. The Democratic nominee, who, by the way, pulled in more voters between 18 and 34 than any other prior nominee. The Democratic nominee who actually inspired young people to come out who've never voted for. And so if we're talking about the threat that we see coming out of Washington, and we're trying to build a coalition of the willing, who are we to have purity tests for who wants to jump into this fight and fight for all New Yorkers? And those of us who consider ourselves for the people, who are moral agents dedicated to fighting and lifting up the cause of justice in the face of the immorality coming out of Washington, need to push all that nonsense aside and do the work of building a broad-based coalition to fight and fight for all of us.
When, I guess maybe it's premature, but since you raised the issue, if after next year's primary you were not the nominee, will you support the nominee?
Of course, as a Democratic nominee, but I'm gonna win, Errol, and that's the point. The point is you put your work in and you fight for the people, and then the best person will win. I believe we have a really strong chance here to do something, not just me, but the people of New York, to do something. This is a movement that is about issues. This is a movement that is about correcting the imbalance that has persisted on Democrats' watch. This is a blue state, Errol, and people are hurting in this state. People are economically disadvantaged in a blue state, and we have to have more accountability. I'm here to bring accountability to that process. And I intend, along with New Yorkers all across the state, to change that for the better.
Are there other phenomenon elsewhere in the state that you've picked up where young people are coming out in numbers the way we saw in the Democratic primary here in the city?
I think young folks, I was just out in, like I said, Syracuse to the town hall. One of the things that I get from a lot of folks all across the state who are watching the mayor's race. And what they're trying to figure out is, where is not just the city going, but where is the state going to go? And are we going to move in a direction where there is a willingness, for example, to raise revenue from those who have a lot already? Is there a willingness to stop giving away corporate giveaways, right? Is there a willingness to say, how about we take these public dollars and invest them in our younger folks and give them an opportunity? There's an economic nihilism out there right now that our young people are saddled with because they don't believe they could be better off than their parents or their grandparents. This might be the first time in our country's history where the generation coming up is not only going to be better off, but worse off. Worse off than the generation ahead of them. That's unacceptable here in New York and certainly all across America.
Okay, we are going to see you out on the campaign trail. Thanks so much for coming by. Great talking with you.
Thank you.